December 17, 1944. Baugnez crossroads, Belgium, SS-Oberführer Joachim Peiper examined the 113 American prisoners herded into the frozen field with satisfaction. His Kampfgruppe had just captured an intelligence goldmine. Battery B of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, the very specialists who coordinated Allied artillery strikes across the Ardennes front. These weren't hardened infantry who might resist interrogation. Artillery observers possessed the most valuable secrets imaginable. Radio frequencies connecting Allied gun positions, radar coordinates for German artillery locations, and detailed maps of American defensive positions. SS officers whispered excitedly about the tactical windfall. Rear-echelon soldiers who surely lacked the mental conditioning to withstand serious questioning. Peiper's veterans had perfected interrogation techniques across 3 years of brutal Eastern Front campaigns. Their psychological methods combined accumulated intelligence files with extended questioning sessions designed to break prisoner resistance through apparent omniscience rather than crude torture. The Wehrmacht had developed sophisticated approaches using trivial details to create comprehensive intelligence pictures that left prisoners believing resistance was futile. The timing couldn't be better. Hitler's Ardennes offensive required precise knowledge of Allied artillery positions to succeed, and these 113 Americans held exactly that information. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion used advanced sound ranging, flash ranging, and radar systems requiring over 60 miles of field telephone wire connecting observation posts. Every captured soldier potentially knew frequencies, coordinates, and operational procedures worth entire divisions. Snow crunched under SS boots as officers organized interrogation teams. The temperature hovered around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to encourage cooperation. These soft Americans would break quickly under professional pressure, revealing Allied battle plans that could change the war's outcome. But could these SS veterans actually extract the intelligence they desperately needed from American soldiers trained in operational security protocols? The convoy had been traveling the narrow road from Schönberg to St. Vith when Kampfgruppe Peiper's lead Panther tanks emerged from the morning fog. Battery B's lightly armed trucks and jeeps stood no chance against 5,000 SS Panzer Grenadiers supported by 40 Mark IV Panthers. After brief resistance, 113 Americans raised their hands in surrender, unaware they carried some of the war's most sensitive intelligence. SS officers immediately recognized the tactical significance of their captives. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion represented the Allied artillery's eyes and ears across the entire Ardennes sector. These men operated advanced sound-ranging equipment that pinpointed German gun positions through acoustic triangulation, flash-ranging systems that calculated coordinates from muzzle flashes, and radar installations capable of tracking incoming shells. Each prisoner potentially knew radio frequencies connecting dozens of Allied artillery batteries stretching from Luxembourg to the North Sea. The battalion's technical capabilities fascinated German intelligence officers. American artillery observers maintained over 60 miles of field telephone wire connecting sound centrals to microphone posts scattered throughout the front lines. Their operations sections coordinated with topographic teams to create detailed firing solutions, while radar platoons provided real-time tracking of German artillery activities. This wasn't random tactical knowledge. It was systematic intelligence about Allied defensive positions that could determine the Ardennes offensive's success. Kampfgruppe Peiper's interrogation specialists had developed sophisticated psychological techniques during 3 years of Eastern Front campaigns. Their approach relied on creating an illusion of omniscience rather than crude physical coercion. German interrogators accumulated seemingly trivial details, unit nicknames, personal grudges, even where soldiers stopped to urinate, then presented this information to create the impression they already knew everything. The technique proved devastatingly effective against prisoners who believed resistance was futile. The Wehrmacht's interrogation doctrine emphasized patience and apparent friendliness. Luftwaffe specialists had perfected methods using comfortable surroundings, extended conversations, and accumulated intelligence files to break prisoner resistance. They understood that American soldiers received basic security training, but artillery observers weren't elite infantry conditioned for prolonged resistance under pressure. Most captured rear-echelon personnel eventually revealed classified information when faced with professional psychological manipulation. American operational security protocols created specific vulnerabilities that German intelligence had identified. The newly implemented top-secret classification system, established in March 1944, protected information causing exceptionally grave danger to the nation. However, field artillery coordination required constant radio communication using frequencies that prisoners inevitably memorized. Special security officer systems provided secure intelligence dissemination, but combat operations demanded that observation battalion personnel know sensitive details to perform their mission. The timing aligned perfectly with German strategic requirements. Hitler's Ardennes offensive depended on neutralizing Allied artillery advantages through precise intelligence about gun positions and communication networks. The 285th prisoners could provide exact coordinates for counter-battery fire, radio frequencies for electronic warfare, and detailed knowledge of Allied defensive preparations. This intelligence windfall could enable German forces to achieve the element of surprise essential for reaching Antwerp. SS intelligence officers organized systematic interrogation teams as the 113 prisoners were processed at the Baugnez crossroads. The frozen field provided an ideal location for preliminary questioning before transporting valuable prisoners to formal interrogation facilities. Weather conditions around 20 degrees Fahrenheit would encourage cooperation, while the isolated location prevented interference from other German units competing for intelligence access. Everything appeared perfect for extracting the most valuable tactical intelligence captured during the entire Ardennes campaign. The SS had professional interrogators, vulnerable prisoners possessing critical information, and battlefield conditions favoring psychological pressure tactics. German intelligence doctrine had proven successful throughout the war, particularly against American rear-echelon personnel lacking intensive resistance training. But would these time-tested interrogation methods actually work against soldiers who had sworn to protect Allied operational security? The systematic interrogation never began. SS officers abandoned their carefully planned psychological techniques within minutes of assembling the prisoners. Instead of transporting valuable intelligence assets to secure questioning facilities, Kampfgruppe Peiper's soldiers lined up the 113 Americans in the frozen field at Baugnez crossroads. Machine gun fire erupted across the defenseless prisoners without warning. The sophisticated Wehrmacht interrogation doctrine that had proven successful throughout the war was discarded in favor of immediate execution. SS troops walked among the fallen Americans, delivering individual shots to ensure no survivors could reveal German positions or operational plans. The irony was devastating. These same SS officers who had celebrated capturing America's most valuable artillery intelligence specialists were now systematically destroying their intelligence windfall. Every radio frequency, radar coordinate, and artillery position known by the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion died with the men who possessed that knowledge. The tactical information that could have provided German forces crucial advantages in the Ardennes offensive was being obliterated rather than extracted. Bodies crumpled into the snow as temperatures hovered around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. The frozen ground that SS officers had viewed as ideal for encouraging prisoner cooperation became a killing field where American soldiers fell without revealing a single classified detail. No interrogation rooms, no psychological pressure, no accumulated intelligence files, just systematic murder of the most informed prisoners captured during the entire Battle of the Bulge. SS troops continued their methodical execution while completely ignoring the intelligence value of their captives. Artillery observers who knew precise coordinates for Allied gun positions across the Ardennes front were shot without questions. Radio operators familiar with frequencies connecting dozens of Allied batteries were killed before revealing communication protocols. Radar specialists capable of describing American electronic warfare capabilities died in silence. The field execution represented a catastrophic intelligence failure disguised as brutality. Kampfgruppe Peiper possessed prisoners who could have provided detailed knowledge of Allied defensive preparations, artillery coordination networks, and operational security procedures. Instead of exploiting this tactical goldmine through professional interrogation techniques, SS soldiers were destroying irreplaceable intelligence assets. Some Americans collapsed immediately, while others remained motionless after being shot. The freezing temperatures that SS officers had planned to use for psychological pressure now worked against German intelligence gathering entirely. Rather than encouraging cooperation through discomfort, the sub-zero conditions were preserving potential survivors who maintained absolute silence about Allied secrets. German soldiers moved through the field, checking bodies and firing additional shots into suspected survivors. The systematic execution continued for several minutes while valuable intelligence died with each American soldier. SS officers who had anticipated hours of productive interrogation were instead witnessing the complete destruction of their intelligence windfall. The massacre represented everything wrong with SS field tactics, brutal efficiency that completely ignored strategic objectives. But in their haste to eliminate witnesses, had the Germans actually failed to eliminate all the intelligence threats lying motionless in the frozen Belgian field? But the SS officers had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Among the motionless bodies scattered across the frozen field, several Americans remained very much alive. Ted Paluch lay wounded but conscious, maintaining absolute silence despite excruciating pain as German soldiers moved through the area. The same sub-zero temperatures that had been intended to encourage prisoner cooperation now provided life-saving camouflage for survivors determined to protect Allied secrets. The psychological resilience displayed by these artillery observers shattered every German assumption about American military discipline. Rather than breaking under extreme duress, the survivors demonstrated operational security training that surpassed SS expectations entirely. Men who had been dismissed as soft rear-echelon personnel were proving more mentally conditioned than hardened Eastern Front veterans had anticipated. Warren Schmitt remained motionless for hours while German vehicles passed within feet of his position. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion security protocols held firm even under conditions no training manual had ever contemplated. These men possessed radio frequencies connecting dozens of Allied artillery batteries, radar coordinates for German positions, and detailed knowledge of American defensive preparations. Yet none of this critical intelligence was being extracted through brutality. The irony became increasingly apparent as afternoon shadows lengthened across the Baugnez crossroads. SS interrogation specialists who had celebrated capturing America's most valuable intelligence assets were now walking past survivors who maintained perfect noise discipline despite severe injuries. Ted Paluch later recalled lying completely still while Germans pumped water from a nearby well, forcing himself to ignore thirst and pain to protect Allied operational security. German psychological warfare doctrine had failed completely. The Wehrmacht's sophisticated interrogation techniques relied on creating illusions of omniscience and inevitable defeat to break prisoner resistance. Instead, the SS had created a situation where surviving Americans were more determined than ever to prevent intelligence compromise. The massacre had transformed potential sources into absolutely unbreakable security risks. Multiple survivors endured hours of motionless waiting in temperatures around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Their mental fortitude exceeded every German prediction about American resolve under extreme pressure. Artillery observers who supposedly lacked elite infantry conditioning were demonstrating operational security discipline that rivaled the most experienced combat veterans. The complete intelligence failure became undeniable as German units continued operations around the massacre site. No radio frequencies had been extracted, no artillery coordinates compromised, no defensive positions revealed. The 113 prisoners who had represented Hitler's best opportunity for tactical intelligence about Allied preparations in the Ardennes were either dead or maintaining absolute silence about classified information. SS officers began recognizing the magnitude of their strategic blunder. Professional interrogation techniques that had proven successful throughout the war were never attempted. Instead of exploiting America's most valuable intelligence windfall, they had created witnesses whose testimony would eventually reach Allied command. The psychological impact was devastating, not on American prisoners, but on German forces realizing they had underestimated enemy determination. But would these motionless survivors actually escape to reveal the SS brutality that had completely failed to break American operational security? As darkness fell over the Baugnez crossroads, the unthinkable began unfolding before German eyes. Ted Paluch rose from among the corpses and sprinted toward the hedgerow, followed by Warren Schmitt and several other survivors who had maintained perfect silence for hours. The SS officers who had celebrated capturing America's most valuable intelligence assets were now watching their prisoners escape without revealing a single classified detail. The survivors moved with tactical precision that stunned German observers. Paluch crawled through a gap in the hedgerow and remained motionless while SS soldiers pumped water from a nearby well, demonstrating noise discipline that exceeded elite infantry standards. These soft artillery observers were exhibiting operational security training that rivaled the most experienced combat veterans. German units stationed around the crossroads opened fire as Americans raced for the tree line, but the damage was already done. Multiple survivors reached the railroad embankment and began moving toward Malmedy along tracks that provided concealment from German patrols. Kenneth Ardennes, despite being wounded, joined the escape route that would carry witness testimony directly to Allied command. The intelligence failure became undeniable as survivors approached friendly lines. Ted Paluch encountered fellow 285th personnel including Matera, Anderson and Johnson, forming a group that possessed comprehensive knowledge of German positions, unit strengths and tactical movements. Rather than providing intelligence to the SS through interrogation, these Americans were now carrying detailed information about Kampfgruppe Peiper's operations back to Allied forces. SS officers faced the horrifying realization that their brutal tactics had completely backfired. The 113 prisoners who should have revealed Allied artillery positions, radio frequencies, and defensive preparations were either dead or escaping with German intelligence instead. The massacre had transformed potential intelligence sources into active threats carrying classified knowledge of SS movements and capabilities. The survivors reached the 291st Engineer Battalion at Malmedy, carrying intact operational security protocols and devastating testimony about German war crimes. Every radio frequency, artillery coordinate, and defensive position that the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion had been trained to protect remained classified. The sophisticated Wehrmacht interrogation techniques that had proven successful throughout the war were never attempted. German command structure began recognizing the strategic catastrophe unfolding across the Ardennes front. Instead of extracting crucial intelligence about Allied preparations, SS forces had created witnesses whose testimony would rally American resistance and provide detailed intelligence about German operations. The psychological impact was devastating, not on American morale, but on German forces realizing they had fundamentally misunderstood enemy determination. The Baugnez crossroads massacre represented everything wrong with SS tactical doctrine. Brutal efficiency that completely ignored strategic objectives while strengthening enemy resolve. Professional interrogation specialists who could have extracted valuable intelligence were replaced by field executioners who destroyed their own intelligence windfall. But as news of the massacre spread through Allied lines, would the SS brutality that failed to break American operational security actually strengthen enemy resistance throughout the Battle of the Bulge? News of the Malmedy massacre spread through Allied lines like wildfire, reaching 1st Army headquarters within 4 hours of the killings. By evening, every American unit across the Ardennes front knew that SS forces were executing prisoners rather than conducting interrogations. The intelligence failure that German officers had celebrated became a strategic catastrophe as Allied resistance hardened beyond anything the Wehrmacht had anticipated. General Eisenhower's response demonstrated the complete reversal of German expectations about American resolve. Rather than intimidating Allied forces into submission, the massacre became a rallying cry that strengthened defensive positions throughout the Battle of the Bulge. American units began adopting unofficial policies against taking SS prisoners, transforming German brutality into a psychological weapon against Wehrmacht morale. The tactical intelligence windfall that SS officers had expected never materialized. Instead of extracting Allied artillery positions, radio frequencies, and defensive preparations from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, German forces now faced survivors who carried detailed knowledge of Kampfgruppe Peiper's operations back to Allied command. Ted Paluch and other escapees provided precise information about German unit strengths, equipment capabilities, and tactical movements that proved invaluable for Allied counter-operations. American retaliation demonstrated the psychological impact of German brutality. The 11th Armored Division executed 80 Wehrmacht prisoners at Chenogne on January 1, 1945, directly citing the Malmedy massacre as justification. The SS tactic of intimidation through brutality had backfired completely, creating a cycle of violence that eliminated German opportunities for intelligence gathering through prisoner interrogation. The frozen bodies at Baugnez crossroads remained visible evidence of German strategic failure until January 14, 1945, when American forces finally recovered the site. For nearly a month, the massacre site served as a constant reminder of SS brutality that strengthened Allied determination rather than weakening resistance. Every passing Allied unit witnessed the consequences of German interrogation policies that prioritized execution over intelligence extraction. Wehrmacht commanders began recognizing the broader implications of their failed psychological warfare. The sophisticated interrogation techniques that had proven successful throughout the war were being abandoned for brutal field executions that strengthened enemy resolve. Professional intelligence gathering was being replaced by random violence that provided zero tactical advantages while creating determined witnesses. The massacre's impact extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. Allied propaganda services used survivor testimony to demonstrate German war crimes, further solidifying international support for the war effort. The SS attempt to intimidate American forces through brutality had created powerful ammunition for Allied psychological operations against German morale. German intelligence services faced the devastating realization that their most valuable prisoner capture of the entire Ardennes campaign had yielded absolutely nothing. The 113 Americans who possessed critical knowledge of Allied artillery coordination, radio frequencies, and defensive positions were either dead or had escaped with German intelligence instead. The massacre represented a complete intelligence failure disguised as tactical brutality. Rather than breaking American operational security, the Malmedy massacre had strengthened Allied resistance while providing zero strategic advantages to German forces desperately needing intelligence about Allied preparations. The Malmedy massacre trial opened at Dachau on May 16, 1946, exposing the complete strategic failure of SS interrogation doctrine to international scrutiny. 74 defendants, including SS-Oberführer Joachim Peiper, faced charges for war crimes that had yielded absolutely zero tactical intelligence despite killing 84 American soldiers. The prosecution's case demonstrated that German forces had systematically destroyed their most valuable intelligence windfall of the entire Ardennes campaign. Defense attorneys could not justify any military advantage gained from the massacre. No Allied radio frequencies were compromised, no artillery positions revealed, no operational security breached. The 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion's classified knowledge of sound ranging systems, radar coordinates, and communication networks died with the murdered soldiers rather than benefiting German intelligence. The SS had transformed America's most informed prisoners into martyrs who strengthened Allied resolve. On July 16, 1946, military tribunals convicted all defendants, sentencing 43 to death and 23 to life imprisonment. However, the ultimate irony emerged during post-war analysis. Not a single death sentence was executed, and all prisoners were released by December 1956. The SS officers who had celebrated capturing intelligence goldmine served minimal sentences for destroying their own strategic opportunity. The Baugnez Crossroads Memorial stands today as testimony to American operational security training that proved unbreakable under extreme conditions. 84 granite stones mark the exact location where Wehrmacht interrogation doctrine failed completely, creating witnesses instead of intelligence sources. The site represents the ultimate vindication of American military discipline protocols over German psychological warfare techniques. German military historians later acknowledged the catastrophic intelligence failure at Malmedy. Professional interrogation specialists who had proven successful throughout the war were replaced by field executioners who strengthened enemy resistance while gaining nothing. The massacre demonstrated everything wrong with SS tactical doctrine: brutal efficiency that completely ignored strategic objectives. Post-war American military analysis validated the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion security training under conditions no manual had contemplated. Survivors like Paluch and Warren Schmitt became examples of operational security excellence, maintaining classified protocols despite extreme physical and psychological trauma. Their testimony proved that American rear-echelon personnel possessed mental conditioning that exceeded German expectations entirely. The Malmedy massacre's strategic impact extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. Rather than intimidating Allied forces, SS brutality became a rallying cry that strengthened resistance throughout the Battle of the Bulge. German attempts at psychological warfare through execution backfired completely, creating determined enemies instead of demoralized prisoners. The ultimate lesson remains stark. Sophisticated Wehrmacht interrogation techniques that had extracted intelligence throughout the war were abandoned for random violence that provided zero tactical advantages. The SS officers who laughed about interrogating soft American artillery observers discovered that American military discipline was unbreakable, even under conditions that exceeded every prediction about human endurance. The Malmedy massacre stands as history's definitive example of how brutality destroys intelligence gathering while strengthening enemy resolve, exactly the opposite of every German assumption about American character and military training.